sank. The country's dollar-denominated sovereign bonds were quoted at around 17 cents on the dollar on March 2nd, down from 95 cents the previous week.
It is more or less being shoved into the financial equivalent of the Stone Age.
You'll see over the coming weeks that a global economy, a Western-oriented economy, a relatively well-off middle-class economy, is going to see its livelihood be wiped out.
Although Russia will bear the brunt of these sanctions, their impact is already being felt across the world.
You don't cut yourself off from one of the world's largest exporters of oil and gas and other valuable commodities overnight and expect there to be no effect.
This month, the price for Brent crude oil hit a record high.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy.
The Biden administration banned the import of Russian oil, though the U.S. only imports about 8% of its oil from Russia.
Объявили о том, что закрывают импорт российской нефти на американский рынок. Цены там высокие, инфляция беспрецедентно высокая, наверное, достигла исторических максимумов. Результаты своих собственных ошибок пытаются свалить на нас.
Russia produces 11% of global oil and possesses 25% of the world's natural gas reserves, so cutting those resources off from the global economy is unlikely to happen overnight. That's especially true for Russia's biggest natural gas customer, Europe, which relies on Russia for about 40% of its natural gas.
And that's the big question mark. Who's going to touch gas first? It's a third rail. Will Europe do it and say we're going to take the economic costs no matter what?
Putin could preempt that and stop shipments of oil and gas to Europe. That would have a dramatic impact on European economies, but it would also mean that no money is flowing, or hardly any money is flowing into Russia anymore.
Russia is also the world's largest exporter of wheat, a major exporter of coal, and one of the top producers of metals and fertilizer.
How are we going to replace that grain, right? How are we going to make sure that North Africa and the Middle East don't starve as a result of this?
Sanctions are supposed to compel a country to change its behavior, but some experts say these economic tools don't always accomplish their goals.
I think it could backfire, yeah.
Julia Friedlander says historically, they've rarely forced the targeted country to change its behavior.
If your goal is to stop a war, to stop Putin from flattening Ukraine using financial means, then you may lose. Putin tomorrow could flatten Ukraine through aerial bombardment, and then sanctions would have meant nothing. We might come to see that these sanctions were not worth it, that all of the effort that we expended actually caused more crisis than we had reckoned with.
In some cases, sanctions have hastened global conflict rather than ending it.
If you go back in history, you can find the sanctions or oil embargo against Japan pushed the Japanese regime into a corner and led them to respond militarily. And we got Pearl Harbor.
On March 16th, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell announced that the central bank would be hiking interest rates to curb rising inflation, which is being exacerbated by the war.
The surge in prices of crude oil and other commodities that resulted from Russia's invasion of Ukraine will put additional upward pressure on near-term inflation here at home.
The American government can take steps to help manage and assuage some of the pain that is being felt by those that are affected most directly by the increased energy costs.
Right now, there is extraordinary support across the West for these sanctions and for the Ukrainian people. It is not clear that 6 months from now, after a period of very painfully high prices and perhaps weaker economic growth, that support will still be there.